Good afternoon. Welcome to your Innovation Grants, Technology, Commerce, and Trade Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Members Buscaino, Bonin, and Krikorian. And I'd like to get us started. Unless there is an objection from my colleagues, I'd like to move item 1 on consent.
Move the item?
Well, actually, there are cards on that item.
Guess not. Unmove it.
Yeah, in fact, we have cards on all the items from one individual. So why don't we, Mr. Herman, why don't you come forward and you can give your testimony on all items. And on 1 through 5.
And Mr. Chair, will that be 5 minutes on the clock?
So total of 5. Total of 5 minutes. You can talk about all the different items.
Get my ass going here. Gentlemen, good afternoon. It's unfortunately that under general public comment, particular people in this horseshoe in the city of Los Angeles have basically waved our rights away under the Brown Act. Wayne Spindler is not a racist. Wayne Spindler does not hate anyone. Wayne Spindler is one fucking intelligent human being.
We're talking about the 5 items on our agenda.
I'm doing general public comment. You said all 5, right? Or is that different?
On matters before this committee.
Matters before the committee.
So you'll give me public comment after that?
It has to be related to the committee.
But general public comment, right?
Related to the committee.
So
It's not a soapbox.
on item 1, under public fucking right-of-ways, which is my specialty, under the ADA compliance for technology agencies of the city attorney and the ordinance, don't forget to mention DOD, LA, disability, on disability. What have you done for us? Wiltz versus Los Angeles? You are a laughing, shameful, hideous beast, Los Angeles. Talking about public right-of-ways. This item to install and maintain a private line of telecommunication comes first before what? Access ramps? Curb cuts? In addition to many other issues involving our health and safety in the city of Los Angeles? Think of the tremendous harm you bring to the public. The offensive harm you bring to the public. But no one seems to give a rat's ass about people with disability in this city, or as I put it, small town of Los Angeles nowadays, because you don't know how to bankroll. You don't know how to do checks and balances. And for that and that reason, we're fucked up, that we can't get our public right-of-ways fixed. Now going to item 2, Wesson, Bloomfield, and Price, relative to refurbishing and distributing salvage city computers. Well, you know what? They don't work. Get rid of them. Let's go forward. Item number 3 now. Talking about continued from April 5th, 2016. City Administrative Officer's report relative to funding for the Innovation Fund for Los Angeles Fire Department Sober Unit Program. What the fuck's a Sober Unit Program? I've been sober all my fucking life. So we're going to fund some bullshit program like this at a need in a crisis when you have a population of homeless people on our street? God forgive me for using intensifiers and being hopefully not unreasonable, very intelligently reasonable when commenting today. On top of that note, look at item 4, Bonin and Wesson, relative to potential issues of residents of Los Angeles may experience a possible implementation of Southern California, what? Project flight procedures? I've been in a situation like that. You know, it's called flight, fight, fight, flight. I've been in that situation. I know what it's like. I'm a fucking homeless man, NWA. 8 fucking years being homeless. But I'm not upset at any one of you. This is not a personal argument. This is not an attack like you claim Wayne Spindler did to any one of you motherfuckers. We all here for the same purpose, is to gain. Gain. And look at item number 5, talking about the harbor, where Joe Buscaino celebrates his commissioner's report relative to the permit with San Bernardino Public Market LLC for the commercial redevelopment ports, motherfuckers. Do something for God fucking sake for us American people. God bless Trump. God bless Trump. Because we need change. What does it say about indisputable facts? Good afternoon, Ms. Nuri Martinez. 12 minutes late. This meeting starts at 1 o'clock, boys and girls. Yes, it starts at 1 o'clock. Get to the program so we can get it over with. Now to finish. Criticism and the challenge of criticism is a freedom for individuals. Verbally, on drawings, to oppose and challenge the right of public concern when it comes to these 5 issues. Brown Act 54950.
Thank you. Now, if there's no objection, as we were discussing earlier, I'd like to take item number 1 on consent. Seeing no objections, that'll be the order. And we'll move now to item number 2. And Mr. Ross, come forward. Would you please read the item into the record?
Item number 2 is the motion for council members Wesson, Blumenfield, Price et al. Relative to refurbishing and distributing salvaged city computers to disadvantaged communities throughout the city as part of the citywide expansion of the R-Cycle LA program, also referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Great. And we had one card, and that was satisfied in the previous rant. And we will move now to Mr. Ross.
Good afternoon. Certainly our council members know that technology has revolutionized the way we work, the way we play, and even the way we connect as human beings. However, as you also are certainly very familiar with, access to technology is not universal. And we are too often a society of digital haves and have-nots. In 2014, the City of LA had to replace 10,000 PCs from across its city departments as a part of the Windows XP end-of-life operating system. But through a joint partnership, this city challenge became an opportunity to help reduce the digital divide here in LA. We started a pilot program known as R-Cycle LA. It consisted of participation from the Mayor's Office, Council President Wesson, Councilman Blumenfield, City of LA departments such as General Services, which provide warehousing, Bureau of Sanitation, which provide resources, ITA, which provide project management. We partner with nonprofits such as the LA Clean Tech Incubator, Human IT, Everyone On, Best Buy, and Citibank. There were 3 objectives. Number 1, to provide as many refurbished PCs as possible to low-income households at no cost with affordable internet options for connectivity. Number 2, to provide job training and create local jobs through the refurbishment and recycling of these city computers. And number 3, to reduce electronic waste by reducing the number of city computers being sent to the landfill. Since September 2014, I am proud to say that we have collected 10,000 PCs from city departments. We have recycled 3,200 PCs through Human IT, avoiding hazardous e-waste in our landfills. We've refurbished 2,600 PCs in preparation for distribution, and we have distributed over 1,700 computers to families in need in LA, including 600 PCs through HACLA. In addition, this program has resulted in the employment of 10 temporary and full-time positions, the training of over 100 unskilled youths in computer refurbishment, and digital literacy training provided by YPI to over 900 families. This pilot ended on April 2nd. With the addition of new council funding, we will work towards refurbishing about another 1,500 computers that are in the warehouse. This phase 2 begins on July 1st. I would certainly like to convey appreciation to our mayor, Council President Wesson, Councilman Blumenfield, and many other elected officials who supported this pilot program called R-Cycle LA. I'd also like to send special appreciation to the city departments who contributed 10,000 PCs towards this effort, and it wasn't easy, especially our partners of General Services Department who continue to provide warehousing, and the Bureau of Sanitation who continue to provide resources, and of course our nonprofit partners, Human IT, the LA Clean Tech Incubator, HACLA, and others. certainly available for any questions on this initiative and this pilot.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. This is one of those feel-good issues. You know, it's just a win-win all around. You know, last year when I went out with Mr. Wesson on the pilot to his area, we were distributing the computers. It really just, it's amazing to see what was previously considered junk or, you know, salvage material. Salvage material is now being used to connect Angelenos every day, and it's part of the overall goal of making us the most connected city in the nation. It's you know, what's before us today, colleagues, is a very simple contract extension. The money for this program was included in the budget. It's a modest amount, but before us is almost perfunctory. But colleagues, any questions or comments? Nope. So seeing no, without objection, we will approve. We will approve the recommendation to continue the contract.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving along to item number 3. Mr. Vanessa, will you read this into the record?
Item number 3 is a report from the City Administrative Officer relative to funding from the Innovation Fund for the Los Angeles Fire Department Sober Unit Program.
And there are no additional public comment cards other than what we have heard already. So, Dr. Exie, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Bianca Swan, Project Coordinator for the Innovation and Performance Commission. The Innovation and Performance Commission is recommending the following Innovation Fund item for funding. The Los Angeles Fire Department Sober Unit in the amount of $169,521. The Los Angeles Fire Department is requesting $169,521 to pilot the Sobering Center Emergency Response Unit, known as the Sober Unit. This pilot involves partnerships between LAFD, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services. The sober unit would be staffed by a firefighter paramedic, a LASA community outreach worker for the purpose of providing assistance to serial inebriates by providing rapid medical evaluations and, if needed, providing transportation to the sobering center that would be run by LA County. The goal of the pilot is to reduce the utilization of 911 and ambulance transportation of serial inebriates. Dr. Eckstein and I are available to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. And the reason we continued it last time, it's a great program, but the question was how would it fit in with the homeless strategy? So if you could talk about the differences, what we've done to make it fit in better and how you see it fitting in now.
Well, initially the original submission teamed a social worker with a firefighter paramedic, and there was an opportunity to see how we could tie it in with what LASA is already doing in that area. So Fire went and met with LASA to see how we could combine efforts, and it actually resulted in a decrease in the amount of money being asked.
Yeah, this is an outstanding opportunity for a partnership between the county's efforts and the city's efforts. So as you know, our business resources in the city and Fire Station 9 are going on these individuals, most of whom are homeless, many of whom are chronic alcoholics, and they're transporting frequently to the hospital. Huge cost tying up our very busy resources. So the Department of Health Services will be opening a freestanding sobering center around 6th and Maple sometime in the fall. And our revision on this proposal was we were partnering with LASA. So LASA will provide the community outreach worker who already is expert in working with the homeless and trying to get them to voluntarily take advantage of some of the various programs that are out there. The paramedic would do the medical clearance, and the concept is these individuals would be transported to the sobering center in lieu of an ambulance transporting to the emergency department with all the subsequent costs and tying up of our resources. And not the least of which, in terms of the yield of this program, is to decrease the recidivism rate of these patients. The goal at the sobering center is these patients, once they get sober, is they will hopefully be placed into detox and then transitional housing to provide them definitive care and to get the help that they need and get them off the streets.
It's a great idea. Tell us, what is the percentage of these serial inebriates that are consist of the transports? Of all the transports that you have, how many would qualify under this?
Of all the transports citywide?
Well, or I guess in the pilot area.
Well, for the pilot, this resource would only be transporting the public or serial inebriates, so patients who are identified as being inebriated in public or patients that we've identified through our database or through our resources in Station 9 as patients we've transported, the EMS super users who have this type of problem. So obviously there's a disproportionate number of patients who would fit this program in this downtown Skid Row area. In terms of overall percentage of our transports, I don't have that number, but it's a significant percentage in this part of the city.
I'm just trying to get a sense of how the shifts are going to translate into savings or what you expect in terms of time and money savings that would result from this.
Well, we're going to be looking at, for every patient that we transport to the sobering center with this program, we're going to get outcome data through our partnership with health services and the sobering center to look at not just decreased rate of subsequent 911 utilization, see how many patients actually complete the program and are successfully placed into detox and transitional housing, because that's the true measure of success. The other benefits, as I mentioned, would be decreased number of transports for resources, particularly in Station 9, and subsequent decrease in wall time as well, which would increase availability of our scarce resources.
And ultimately, I'd love it if the metrics pan out the way we hope that they will, that we even start approaching hospitals and health insurers for ways, other ways to fund this, because they're going to see substantial benefits from this as well. And, to monetize the avoided costs, not just on our end of on the ledger, but also on their end of the ledger. If we can utilize that, that'll help us scale this program in the future.
Yes, and there's been success in other cities such as Denver and San Francisco that have implemented similar programs. There was actual significant cost savings running into the millions of dollars, and the human stories were these individuals who were helped really quite dramatic, and of course the downstream effects to free up their resources in terms of fire and EMS also were significant.
Colleagues, questions or comments?
So I just had a question about where is it going to get piloted? So it's in the report it mentions that the sobering center is scheduled to open in Skid Row in July. Is this what the money is going towards, that sobering center?
No, ma'am. The sobering center, that's under the auspices and under the budget of the Department of Health Services. We're partnering with them, so we're going to have a mobile sober unit, which will be an LAFD van staffed by a firefighter paramedic to do medical clearance and a LASA outreach worker. So so LASA will cover the cost and salary of the outreach worker. This proposal covers the cost of the medical equipment to do medical clearance and the firefighter paramedic salary. So this is a shared cost between city and county. It's almost akin to the LAPD SMART teams, which have been so successful.
Where are you going to? So it's a pilot program. What areas of the city are you focusing in?
It's going to be focused in the downtown area, Skid Row area, which is our Battalion 1. So in and around the area with the largest number of homeless individuals who would be able to benefit from this program. So downtown area, including Skid Row, and the sobering center will be on 6th and Maple, and the implementation of the program, if it's funded, would coincide with the opening of DHS's sobering center, so we have a place to transport the patients.
So when I mentioned earlier, if the money was going towards this effort to open the sobering center, I'm referring to the one at Skid Row. So that's what.
No. That's completely that's the county. This is just for this mobile sober unit to identify patients and transport them to the sober.
Same general area.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had an opportunity to meet with Chief Terrazas and Dr. Katz months ago on trying to emulate this program in my district. In my district, I have the MLK Medical Center as well as the UCLA County Medical Center as well, where, just for clarification to Ms. Martinez's point, these sober centers are in the county facilities, such as the MLK Center, hospital, and also the UCLA County Hospital as well, right?
That's correct. This would be unique because this will be the first freestanding sobering center in LA that's not part of a hospital. Amazing
effort, work in a smarter capacity so that our paramedics don't get caught up in the hospitals, whereas then we're finding a lot of them are taking a lot of time, wall time in the hospitals, and even more so to be able to have LASA partner with the fire department and also the county shows the ongoing efforts of partnering with the county in addressing the homelessness issue in this area. So really appreciate the effort. I'd love to see this expanded throughout the city, and so I know this is going to be a pilot program, and when are we going to reassess to know that we measure our successes and know that we're going to expand this in the future? Are you doing a report back, or?
Well, once approved, certainly we'll be collecting a number of metrics, quarterly reports, an annual report. With our hope is the data will be so compelling that we'll be able to expand this to other areas of the city. There's obviously a number of areas of the city that have a tremendous similar need, and hopefully we'll, in parallel, county will expand other sobering centers. So it'll be a kind of a feeder, because of the tremendous growing population who desperately need these services. And clearly the impact on fire department is unsustainable.
Yep.
And
Go ahead.
a part of the innovation fund process is for departments to provide those metrics back so that we can report on them. We have developed metric sheets for each project, for each department, for them to be able to provide that data back so we can report it back to you all as well.
So bottom line, proactive approach, trying to avoid more 911 calls for those who are under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and with the paramedic in the van, identifies based on the objective symptoms, and at the same time you have LASA there to offer the wraparound services needed. Win-win for everyone. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And we'll get the periodic reports with all the Innovation Fund updates and just see what the metrics are. And then in the ideal world, they'll be finding that it's going to save money, and that'll be reflected on their next year's budget request, and they'll be expanding this throughout the city, would be the hope.
Can we look at, if I can, Mr. Chair, look at creating a partnership with the Martin Luther King Medical Center in South Los Angeles?
Yes.
Because I believe there's already a sober center there on site. I don't know, were you aware of it?
No, there's also one that's opened by County USC. So yes, the hospitals realize this is growing. Mm-hmm. I think this opportunity is unique because it's not part of a hospital. The hospitals tend to reflexively do very costly workups on these patients, and this freestanding facility, I think, it really enables us, working with our partners in the county, to medically clear the patients in the field and really get them expedited into detox and transitional housing. So our hope is, once this is approved and shown to be successful, we could expand and use the sobering center by MLK, the one by USC, and hopefully the additional freestanding sobering centers. And meeting with Dr. Katz, again, they had similar success in San Francisco, and they're very excited to partner with us and expand this program. We've also met with law enforcement, LAPD, who also very enthusiastically support
We've
this.
evolved, guys. I tell you, when I was a police officer, what we do, we just drop these individuals off the Weingart Center, fill out an FI, take them to the detox center, and off you go, and go to the next call. Here we are today, really identifying the problem, being proactive, again, looking at the objective symptoms, but now offering the services so they're not put back out in the street where they'll turn to drugs and alcohol, and next thing you know, you have a revolving door. So I know it's taken us a while, but we're finally wrapping ourselves around this in a good way. Thank you.
Mr. Bonnet, to you.
Thanks. Just quickly, I want to echo what Mr. Buscaino was saying. I'm eager to see this throughout the city. Honestly, I'm very disappointed that the pilot is downtown. I don't think it should have been downtown. You're well on your way, but I think it should have been somewhere else. There's other parts of the city that have a huge problem with homelessness in the neighborhoods, and we don't pilot enough in other areas of the city. So I don't even think we should be doing a pilot. I think this has been successful elsewhere in San Francisco, and we should just be launching it completely. But I'll be working on the Homelessness and Poverty Committee, hopefully trying to reprogram some of the money, $138 million, so we can get this started in Mr. Buscaino's district and my district and others that are hungry for it as quickly as we can. But it's been remarkably successful elsewhere. I have a separate issue that isn't directly related to this, that we seem to be duplicating efforts with the city and the county, each creating sobering centers downtown. I talked about that during the budget process. This is separate from that, but I think it underscores the problem that I have, that we're focusing exclusively on Skid Row at the expense of other parts of the city. And I know Mr. Weezer is eager to see other parts of the city providing service. So I'm hoping we get beyond just a Skid Row pilot very quickly.
Yeah, and if I may, we've had these precise discussions with Dr. Katz and the fire chief and myself and the CAO. We've talked about other areas of need, such as Hollywood and Venice, just to name two others. And we're pardon? And San Pedro. Sadly, there's almost no part of the city that's immune right now that has a need. But we're working in conjunction with the county. So if they build it, we'll develop the sobering center to identify the patients, but it has to be done safely because there's medical and safety issues. That's where the paramedic comes in. So I think this is a great partnership, and hopefully we'll be able to expand it to other parts of the city, including San Pedro.
Thank you. What's the interaction with the nurse practitioner program?
The nurse practitioner program is still
Is there an interaction? Is there any overlap with this?
Not specifically, no, sir. The nurse practitioner program has taken on a new level where they're working on the patients with acute mental illness. So we're collaborating with the mental evaluation unit from LAPD, and along the same line, patients with unique needs, rather than having paramedics take these individuals to the local ER. Now working with the assistance of LAPD, our nurse practitioner response unit now is going on patients with acute mental health crises and doing medical clearance on scene and transporting these patients to the Exodus psychiatric urgent care facilities. There's one by USC, there's one in Culver City, there's one in Olive View, and one at MLK. And again, that's freeing up transports, decreasing wall time, and allowing these individuals in mental health crisis to get immediate psychiatric care. So this is something we've just started on, and we'll hope to expand as well. So perhaps a little bit of overlap, but different focus for the MPRU. But again, they're taking on also a growing vulnerable patient population that's in great need that's not being served by paramedics taking them to an emergency department.
Thank you. Seems like we're all in agreement. Without objection, we will move forward approve the CAO recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have item number 4. Mr. Espinosa, would you read that into the record, please?
Item number 4 is the motion from Council Members Bonin, Wesson, and Buscaino relative to the potential issues the residents of Los Angeles may experience by the possible implementation of the SoCal Metroplex project flight procedures.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Trifoletti, get us started.
Yes, good afternoon, council members. I'd like to introduce Lisa Trifoletti on behalf of Los Angeles World Airports. I'd like to introduce Scott Tatro and Catherine Pantoja. Both have been with LAWA for roughly over 20 years and worked in the noise management unit and residential sound installation and are very familiar with the technical details of what's being proposed by FAA. Today, what we're going to share with you is give you an overview about a project called the SoCal Metroplex program proposed by FAA. We're going to share with you what that proposal is. It is not a LAWA proposal or a city proposal. We're going to share with you the analysis that they did along with our consultants to understand what it actually means for the communities, in particular your council districts. And then we're going to share with you what the environmental assessment says, whether this is a significant impact or not, and then what we recommend are potential next steps, what we believe you will see with respect to community reaction to the program once it's implemented. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Yep.
Chair, can I just say something by way of introduction? Thanks. I introduced this motion because I wanted the full council to understand what's going on here, because the impacts in various parts of the city could be pretty significant. My district, obviously, is, as well as Mr. Harris Dawson's district, is often the sort of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to airport impacts. But what the FAA is doing is they're going to be essentially, as LAWA staff will explain to you, changing flight patterns. They're going to digitize them, do a much more tech-savvy procedure by which sort of scattered patterns will be consolidated into narrower corridors at potentially different altitudes. And so various different communities will have lots of winners, and they will have a good number of losers. And the losers may be folks who have not had airport impacts before, and they'll be having them a lot more. And it's not just a CD11 impact, it's CD8, it's CD9, it's CD10. There's also potential but different impacts in the valley in CD3 and CD12. And it's been done in other parts of the country and has been the subject of litigation in other parts of the country, and something the city needs to keep an eye on early. I didn't want this to happen and all of a sudden have 5 different council districts wake up one morning and say, what the heck is going on here? It's something we need to be looking at in advance, and LAWA's done some really good work on it.
Yeah, and from the LAWA perspective, we have really leaned in to understand complex information, to be able to digest it in a way that then other people in the community can actually understand what is about to occur, and then be proactive in sharing what the project is. And we've asked FAA to be proactive as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you very much. Scott Tetro. I'm going to try and go through this kind of quickly. I know there's a lot of slides in your presentation, and that's for you to take with you, but I think it might be easier if you kind of watch the wall over here. But so just as a way of a little bit of background on this is part of their the Next Gen program for FAA, which is a massive effort to sort of take us out of the ground-based navigational procedures that have been placed since the 30s and 40s, which is still the technology in use today. Moving toward satellite-based, GPS-based, much more accurate procedures. But the Next Gen itself goes way beyond just the procedural changes. What we're really focusing on here is the performance-based navigation, which will be implemented in the airspaces around larger areas in the country through a process called the optimization of procedures in the Metroplex. So what we call Metroplex is a program that FAA came up with to implement in these larger areas. So again, what is a Metroplex? It's really just a large geographic area that covers multiple airports. There's a whole array of stakeholders using the national airspace, FAA, other lines of business, airport operators, et cetera. And it's really a regional solution rather than one airport specifically, which has been done in the past, and that leads to challenges. So the program goals are really to improve airspace efficiency and reduce complexity. And so the FAA talks about that at great length. What does that really mean? They're going to introduce optimized flight paths on climb and descent into and out of the airspace, promote area navigation everywhere, and I'll explain what that means. The RNP, the required navigational performance, were beneficial, and those are the most accurate procedures in place today. Being implemented today, I should say. They're also going to integrate airspace and procedures design and try and decouple the arrival and departures. So a lot of the procedures are conflicting with each other, and so they're trying to decouple so that there's free flow into and out of the airspace. So this is one of those optimization processes. This is an example of an arrival procedure, and this is very, very generic, by the way. So the historic procedure on the left will show sort of how the airplanes step down, and anybody who's flown, kind of, you feel this, you get down to a certain level and you maintain altitude for a while. Typically you're doing that for separation with other procedures that are crossing through the airspace. So as they decouple these things, you really want to be able to come from your cruise altitude all the way down to the ground without any interference or any communications with air traffic or anything. So it would be a much smoother flight down to the ground. So this would be a much more efficient. You can see the one on the top shows we've gotten rid of a couple of the steps. So you've optimized it a little bit, not maybe 100%, but they're going to be implementing these wherever they can. The other is really going from left to right. You can see the ground-based navigation based on these nav aids. These are ground-based fixes. And you can see these at larger airports. You have an actual device that's on the ground that sets off a beacon, and the aircraft head towards that. There's a lot of spread, which you can see as represented in these boxes. There's a wide spread of traffic as they move from point to point through these procedures. Moving to the right, the RNAV procedures go from waypoints, and these are just coordinates that you can program into the flight systems in the aircraft, and it's a much more accurate point-to-point procedure. The RNAV and RNP actually is the most accurate, where you can program in actual lines that they'll fly, and they can have curved paths that they can actually fly along. So as RNPs get implemented, you will see these planes really flying right over a line. Each one would be right on top of the other. Much more consistent. This is an example of an RNAV procedure, a departure procedure that got implemented in Phoenix, which did lead to some litigation. It wasn't actually part of a Metroplex, but it gives you a really good before and after snapshot of what conventional procedures look like. So the purple tracks represent the conventional tracks on departure, where they come out and fan out into these various places they're heading. And the post-implementation, the RNAV procedure, is in these blue tracks, which is following very fine tracks in the same spot each and every time they depart.
So just to build upon the point that Councilmember Bonin made, you know, there's some winners and some losers. In this case, you had some communities that had less noise, but then the ones that ended up having the concentrated blue line got it over and over and over again. And this is just one procedure. Scott's going to talk about what's being proposed for the LA area.
So this is the Southern California Metroplex. Again, this isn't the first Metroplex. This represents an area all the way from Santa Barbara Airport up here all the way down to the Mexican border, out past 29 Palms over here. So this is a huge area. LAX falling right in the middle here and has the lion's share of the procedures that are really impacted here. But there's about 20 airports in the program here. 10 or 12 of them have procedure changes at their facilities. This is just showing a map of the council areas and the city of Los Angeles, and this shows you how many procedures are going to be impacted through the whole area. Clearly, this goes way beyond just the city of LA impacts, and we've been meeting with other congressional representatives as well. But we want to focus on some of the procedures that might impact certain council districts. So this is one we've been...
Scott, how many total procedures are going to be changed as part of the SoCal Metroplex?
Yeah, there's about 130 procedure changes that are going to be done.
Yeah, it's
some of them are, I've heard 150, I've heard 130. I've used different numbers myself, and quite honestly, it's very difficult to sort of look at. They're going to change this procedure to this one. There's not a lot of one-to-one correlation with what they're doing. So sometimes there's procedures that exist today that are going to be implemented with the new procedure, but the conventional procedure will still be in place. And so it depends on how you count up the total number of procedures that might be impacted. If you count them both, that could be 2. I think we're talking about 130 new procedures that will be developed. So if that helps clarify. So this is an example of the current arrival procedure that comes from the west over the top of Santa Monica on the downwind arrival. And you can see the procedure really ends here, which means that it's using, the air traffic is managing the flow as it turns on the downwind into LAX here, and I'll show you examples of that. But the new procedure will look very different. And you can see it actually moves a little bit. It's about a mile north of the existing procedure. And then this is actually an RNP. If you'll recall, this is the most accurate type of procedure, and these curves here are being programmed in. So anybody who's assigned that RNP will follow right along the top of that line pretty much if they implement it as such. And we're going to show you, these are current tracks, and this is a very standard day of arrivals. You can see there's quite a spread. They consolidate over Santa Monica, and there's quite a spread of traffic, and it gets pushed pretty far out, a lot of these. In the future, we think that there's going to be a lot more consolidation along this new procedure, and then these turns are really going to take a lot of aircraft over the top of those. We've been told as many as 40% of the traffic in 5 years could be following these procedures. And again, we just kind of highlighted which communities within the city and other areas may be impacted by each of these procedures, so that's in there for you to reflect on as well. Another example is a Long Beach departure, which the departures come out of Long Beach over here and they come over the South Bay. They typically are over Redondo, and then they kind of spread out over here. They really go pretty far out and turn up over Malibu over here, and some of them kind of cut over the Palisades. The future procedure here really takes them hugging the coastline here. It brings them over Manhattan Beach here, and then hugging the coastline right over the Palisades and through parts of the valley. So while this doesn't have a volume that LAX has, this is a Long Beach departure. We feel that some of the residents in those areas mentioned here, and I should add the valley to that too, they may notice these as well. These are commercial flights.
Since we're on the front line with the hotlines, I mean, people can't tell the difference between a Long Beach departure sometimes and an LAX
That's
departure.
But it would impact the valley.
Yeah, it would, but these are climbing, and that's our, mistake for not really including that. But you already have flights. If you look in the valley, you can see there's a pretty good spread of the flights over here, and they're probably up over 14,000 feet at that point. What will happen, though, is there'll be more consolidation along this corridor right through here. So while they were spread through this area already, it's going to sort of consolidate them through this area.
It's the same
And-
question, but will the altitude?
In this case, the altitude may be a little higher. They actually deconflicted this procedure with an arrival coming in, so they could allow these to climb more rapidly. So we think it may be a little
theoretically, it could be
higher.
quieter?
Theoretically, although in full climb mode, you're still noticeable. These are not going to be something that's a dramatic impact that far away from the airport, but people tend to notice, especially if they're in, hillside areas where the ambient noise is pretty quiet. This would be one of those things that's just kind of noticeable to people.
Given the totality of the procedures, I mean, what we will offer and we have offered is to sit with each one of your staffs to really go through in detail, the myriad of all the, but we just wanted to pull out some examples to demonstrate to you, what you should be aware of with this proposal at this time.
Yeah, if I could just whip through a couple more examples. This is an existing procedure, which is a little clunky. You can see it takes it kind of out over Malibu and kind of cuts back up here. And that's actually how the existing tracks fly. The new procedure will take it actually out away from the city, although hugging right at the boundary line of the, of the city there. So here's examples of the existing flight tracks, and you can see already it's a little tricky, but a lot of them do fly right along these points. But there are some that kind of cut up here and cut through already. The future will look more like this. So you're really moving where those planes fly a little bit, and perhaps folks in those areas might notice some change.
I'm sorry, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Do you have the flight pattern on the departure hugging the South Coast and South Bay communities?
The current one,
Am I missing it?
we didn't have in there, and I apologize. I think it's mostly flown with just vectoring from the departure. You're talking about the Long Beach departure?
No, the LAX departure.
Oh,
I'm just finding.
this one? So this shows the before and after
I know,
procedure?
but heading south, though,
Oh.
curving around. I think I'm getting concerns from the South Bay communities, harbor area communities, that they're seeing a lot more flights above us where, most
So
of these
you're
numbers
talking about the ones that turn south
Yes,
here and come
yes,
around?
yes.
Yeah, and we deal with a lot of operational issues currently on those
Will that have an
procedures,
impact
but
on this new
we didn't show a
project?
particular change that impacted a city area here related to Metroplex, but we could go back and look
Okay.
at that, what the
Maybe we can
procedure
just talk
change would be.
offline with our respective
Yeah,
staffs.
because the current procedure takes them back, and sometimes they're crossing over in San Pedro area. The Seal Beach is sort of their, where
I
they're
was
heading
awakened
for.
at 4 in the morning at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to the extent that we can, there's a whole other analysis that we did about existing. This is all about the proposed that they haven't implemented to date. We're happy to talk about, the work we've done to understand the existing conditions and what's actually happening. This is, yeah.
This is a nighttime procedure where arrivals come in from the east, and they hit over the top of Santa Monica at 8,000 feet. The new procedure actually reduces the altitude to 7,000 feet over Santa Monica. So we feel like from an altitude standpoint, people, of course, this is like typically used from midnight to 6:30. They may notice a difference, though. So here's sort of the two procedures shown together. The existing one really brings them down the center of this two arrival corridors. They really manage it as one, and then they split them off to the north here to come around arrival this way. So current tracks look like this, and you can see there are already flights up here hitting Santa Monica, but in the future that'll be a lot more. So there'll be a lot more of the flights coming along this red line here following this, and this Cliffy Point's a little different than Santa Monica, so there's a little difference here. And again, a little bit lower, and then this is actually an RNP arrival, so won't impact anybody because it's over the water. And again, we're just trying to highlight certain communities that we think may notice these things. One in the valley, and again, this is a little tricky because the procedure is not as well defined. But so we have a couple of procedures here, but you can see how air traffic already is being managed into the valley. Arrival to Burbank, runway 8, I believe, and what that might look like in the future. And again, mostly we're seeing a consolidation, but the one here is particularly in a different spot. So as it's coming through this area, that looks quite different than what it did in the past. And there's a lot more spread in the current tracks than what it would look like in the future. So again,
So go back.
yep.
So the darker shade in blue, that would probably what Sherman Way.
The light blue is what exists today, and the tracks are spread. And then when this gets approved by FAA and implemented, it'll be consolidated to the next slide.
Right.
To
What
that.
was-
So the,
So it's
so,
moving over, it's actually moving.
and it's concentrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's moving to the,
Currently, I think about it, well, the arrivals to Burbank is usually, I just think of Sherman Way.
that's what you were saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, it's lined up actually with the runway, which coincidentally does go right over the top of Van Nuys Airport and may be very well aligned with Sherman Way. It's pretty close.
That's not that knowing.
I mean, it's really difficult to say
Yeah.
we have some slides to try to show you how things are going to get better for some and how things could get worse for others. And really, it behooves us to bring this to your attention to see, from a policy perspective, how do you weigh, the positives and the negatives, and, what are your options in terms of dealing with this proposal?
And this is going to happen, right?
Well, if you want to jump.
We'll jump into the
let's
schedule.
go.
This is just one other departure procedure during East Flow, which is kind of a minimal operational condition.
So I will explain where the project is at this point. An environmental assessment is almost like what we see at state level, a mitigated negative declaration. They conclude in their environmental analysis, the NEPA environmental analysis, that there's no significant impact. They have their clearly defined threshold, and it doesn't meet the strict test of significant impact from the analysis they provide.
And the FAA's definition of a significant impact is significantly different than a resident's definition of a significant impact.
We understand that. And as part of this EA process, we have been trying to work with them to really highlight for FAA, here are areas of concern. Without favoring one community over the other, they've been living this, right? So they've been trying to share, here are areas of concern, in terms of how can you build upon our knowledge of this community. We offered that, and we still offer that to FAA. We submitted 2 comment letters officially into the record requesting more time so that we could evaluate the changes and really digest the impact. We suggested to the FAA, because before this, they really hadn't done an extensive level of community outreach, and some people will still say they haven't done an extensive level of community outreach, and we've at least tried, but we're standing in the shoes of an agency, and this is not our project. We know that over 3,000 comment letters were submitted to FAA. There are many communities that have concerns, and in some cases, those comment letters propose alternative solutions to the procedures. And to change to the next slide, what we did, and what maybe Scott and Catherine could explain, is we try to just chart out, putting aside the significant thresholds defined in the EA, what will people experience? And so that's what the red and the green is trying to demonstrate. And maybe, Scott, you can explain that.
Right, so this is really a map that shows the difference between when we implement the project and a no-action alternative to the project. So in 5 years, the noise levels at each of the points in this grid, and this is really a map of thousands and thousands of grid points. So at each point, we're color coding it based on whether there would be an increase or a decrease in the noise level with the project. And so with the project, the green shows that there's actually reductions in noise levels. And the scale on the side is, greater than 3 decibel changes are the darker colors. So the darker red means you're going to have an increase in noise of greater than 3 decibels. And some of the procedure changes that I just highlighted to you, like the one arriving over Santa Monica, and we moved that a little bit to the north, and then it consolidated these right here. You can actually see how there's a hot spot for increased noise levels right under that procedure. And just adjacent to that, it actually goes down a little bit. And the second one, I
should just point out for all of this stuff, you talked about the FAA's outreach.
Yeah.
The FAA has not overlaid the impacts of the new consolidated corridors with, for instance, Google Maps, so the folks who actually going to be living under the new impacts know that they will be living under the new impacts.
Actually, the FAA provided all of their procedures in Google Earth. At the very end of the comment period, these became available. We were pressing them for more and more data. The data that's in here wasn't presented in this way, but every point was shown in their data.
Can you make that available?
I took their data and we created this map.
Okay, this is ours.
Yes.
This was part of the comment letter that we submitted, that LAWA submitted to them, and we asked them to sort of validate that we did it properly and that it's based on their own information. But it's basically taking the data that's there. It's just that their data, you'd have to go to a particular location, click on the dot, and you get one little tidbit of information at a time. We just mapped it through the whole area.
Great.
And then I changed the scale here to show a little bit higher impact areas. So the red here actually shows noise level changes of up to 9 decibels in some areas.
Well, wouldn't this be enough to trigger, they're arguing, that it's an environmental assessment. Isn't it enough for us to pick it up based on California standards, or just based on the noise level?
It's not. If you go back to the standards they use here, the 1.5 decibels within the 65 contour is the threshold of significance that NEPA uses, and honestly, that's exactly what we would use for a CEQA analysis as well. So those are much closer into the airport and larger changes. The reportable noise increases, they didn't trigger either. So they didn't have any changes of 5 decibels inside their 45 DNL contour, which again, it's an annual average contour that they didn't actually show, but they have all those values are in their data.
But I think if we were to actually get a list of all of the 3,000 comments and understand what was challenged relative to the significance threshold, what alternative thresholds, were proposed, I think this is the question before, the city and for all the folks interested is, how do you respond to the FAA when they go to approve, and they haven't done it yet. They haven't put out the final EA. And so the timeline that where we are right now, I think is important. We are, so they intended the process to be 3 years start to finish. The project began in 2012. They released the EA in June of 2015, and they extended their comment period twice after pressure from community groups and from congressional members. They are slated to release the final EA any minute. We haven't seen it, and so I think that's when the clock starts to tick in terms of your statute of limitations to understand, whether or not there's somebody out there is going to challenge. We anticipate there will be litigation, and they are stating that they will be implementing the project come November. I think maybe it will be delayed. I don't know, but they are moving forward to implement, and LAWA is here to really share with you what's happening. And also, we have also extended a hand in cooperation with the FAA to help them understand what the impact is going to be, practically speaking, when this actually gets implemented. Because we know at the end of the day, our phones are going to ring.
Mm-hmm. What about alternative studies? Are they required to study several alternatives, or do they just look at the no alternative and the proposed alternative?
The analysis includes the full project or the no project. It's kind of an all or nothing campaign with them. So they don't have various, alternatives out there with partial implementation and such. So it seems like it's all or nothing.
Routes. I mean, how did they chose these routes based on just?
I mean, we've invited the FAA to come and speak before you and to really understand how they chose this. We're really not in the position to explain how, and why, other than, we just wanted to make sure you had awareness.
I have a quick question. In what other parts of the country have they implemented Metroplex? And what kinds of responses or negative impacts have those communities brought forward?
So Metroplex got implemented at some smaller scale areas, DC,
Which airport?
Houston.
Both airports?
It's always all the airports that are in the airspace, they get consideration. I don't know that they had many problems to fix in any of these Metroplexes. I don't really know specifically. DC was done, Houston was done. Northern California was implemented more recently, within the last 18, 24 months, and there's been litigation as a result of that. And there's ongoing discussion about procedures specific to those. Phoenix was actually not a Metroplex, but the one I did show as an example was done as just, they actually did a CADX, or categorical exclusion, on those RNAV procedures and implemented them without any evaluation at all, and that was part of the problem. So there wasn't any public input at all. We're not doing that. They are actually starting another Metroplex process in Phoenix, and Denver also did some changes in the past, but not under Metroplex. So some of them are coming, some of them are in process, some of them were smaller and didn't have any real negative outcry the way Northern California has, for instance.
And I don't believe that any one of the other examples was as comprehensive, was as large of a geographic area, was the number, whether it's 130 or 150. I mean, we'll give you the answer to that, but no, not one other Metroplex was as large as what we're talking about here.
The FAA is still struggling with their own process. They have guidance out on how to implement Metroplexes going forward, which include a lot of involvement with airports. And we were not really involved in the design of the procedures, and I think that was a problem with the process more than anything.
So is this Mr. Chair, is this system using new technology to direct flights, but does it eliminate the towers altogether?
No, not at all.
So it incorporates both?
Yeah, I mean, it gives the tower, and there's a lot of training that goes into this. So the air traffic, more than just the local towers, which really only handle final arrivals and releasing departures, it's those TRACON facilities, ours is in San Diego, that manage most of the air traffic in these procedure changes. And there's, dozens of controllers operating different regions at any time. They'll still have jobs, but there will be a lot less dialogue between pilots and individual controllers. So you reduce that, so you're taking the human away from it a little bit. They can always jump in if they need to and direct somebody, but when you're following these procedures, you're really programming it into the flight management system in the aircraft, and it just flies itself through the airspace. So that's why there's a lot more accuracy to it. But they still will be there, and they still have to manage all that and make sure everything's working properly. But there's a lot of training and workload issues related to it. But their union gets very involved in it. And they actually have two leads on the project. One is from the air traffic and one is from the union rep. So.
And I have one last question. So if the big commercial aircrafts get pushed to the main path, what does that do to the other smaller aircraft that is maybe not as reliable? Because I think we've done a lot around making sure flight paths are not over schools or, homes is inevitable, but schools in particular. What happens to that smaller aircraft that is not as reliable as the larger aircraft? Where do they get pushed off to?
Well, I don't know that this.
Are they using the same path?
They really are. I think what they're really building is procedures that the whole fleet of aircraft that come into LAX in particular, and we have a huge variety of aircraft. We have everything from small propellers to the A380, the biggest plane flying. So with that whole range of the fleet, they have to come up with procedures that they can optimize that work for all of them. And that includes figuring out the speeds that they all can operate in to continue to maintain the proper spacing and so forth. So when we implement a new RNAV procedure, there may be planes that just don't have the equipment to follow that particular procedure, and they're going to continue to be vectored through the airspace with commands from the air traffic controller, rather than just being assigned a new procedure. They know that some of that's still going to happen, and that may relate to more of the smaller planes or planes that are older that don't have the new advanced technologies in them yet. So until all the fleet can fly these procedures, some of them will operate based on conventional procedures with air traffic managing them, more interaction and so forth, and the others will just be assigned this RNAV and RNP arrival, and they go right down to the ground. And until the air traffic at the airport is really just taking them on final to the runways and making sure that there's enough room on the ground when they're allowing them to land and so forth. So that's still going to be the same.
Mr. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. This is the second time I've seen this now. We've been trying to work closely with our congressional reps on the west side with Karen Bass and Ted Lieu to sort of get a bit of a handle on this. My staff's also done some outreach to Senators Feinstein and Boxer. And one of the things I think might be helpful is if LAWA could report back to us on if there's any possible remedies or alternative designs that could be worked out in coordination with the FAA that would reduce some of the overall noise impacts from the proposed procedures, certainly the most extreme ones. I know Senators Feinstein and Boxer have communicated similarly to the FAA, but I think it would be good if LAWA and the City of Los Angeles did so.
With all due respect, Councilmember, we have offered to sit down with FAA multiple times to do exactly that, to help them digest what they're proposing, to help them understand where we think some of the most egregious changes would be, to help them rethink. We have not actually had we've actually not done that because they know, I think some of the request has been, let's see what it's like and then we'll deal with it after the fact. And so, we have extended that. We will continue to extend that. And so to the extent that we report back and we're no better where we are, I just want to let you know that we have been trying. I also think that to weigh in on any one procedure worries me a little bit, having been a council deputy for you all, and when you just deal with traffic, when you try to solve, the squeakiest wheel, you try to solve for one street, and you think you're doing the right thing for one street, and unfortunately then you end up seeing that traffic spills like water, and you end up impacting other neighborhoods. So I want to be really careful to really look at any one particular procedure when you don't look at it in its entirety. I want to make sure that we don't solve one problem and then create another problem. So that's one of the cautions I have, but we are happy to engage really in a robust way. We definitely need the community, and we need the representatives like yourself to help us get that standing to make that kind of progress.
And have the staffs of CD 8, 9, and 10 gotten an in-depth briefing? Because the impacts on those districts in South LA, I think, are going to be pretty profound.
Yeah, we did that last year. I think there's more information that's now available.
But before or after the end of the comment period where the FAA released the more specific information? Because now you can tell, I can tell where in Mar Vista the impacts will be, and you would be able to tell where in the various South LA neighborhoods the impacts would be, whereas a few months ago.
We will definitely revisit. We've also reached out to Hassan Akrada, the executive director of the Southern California Association of Governments. I think it would be a really good idea for us to do this kind of presentation to all of those communities, because I don't think that they actually have the same level of awareness. So we've done a briefing at the staff level. He's asked us to come back in July. I just worry again about the timing, because we don't have any idea when the final EA is going to be released, and you have a limited window of action.
And to Ms. Martinez's point a minute ago, we now have the ability to determine whether or not one of the new procedures goes over in elementary school, for instance, right?
Well, to the extent that the procedures are defined and over Google Earth, you could look at that. Yeah, you could
be able to tell if there's an elementary school there.
Right.
Yes.
Kids won't be able to hear anymore.
Right.
For a general aviation airport versus a regular airport, is there any distinction in terms of how this works?
In general, no. I think there's just less conflict with a lot of the, like Van Nuys is one of our airports as well. So we looked at procedure changes there, and they didn't really need to do much to the arrival and departure traffic in and out of Van Nuys, for instance, as part of the program, because it didn't correlate to the conflicts that they were trying to solve for better managing the whole airspace. But they did look at all those. I think a lot of the smaller airports ended up, with no procedure changes or just a couple that are not going to be as dramatic as some of the other things that we've seen with really moving, the air traffic from LAX and Orange County and San Diego. Those are the ones that have seen more significant changes that would be more noticeable.
But Burbank would have an impact.
Burbank too, yeah. Yeah, and we showed one example of Burbank. They may have other procedure changes as well, just that maybe aren't directly over the city of LA.
Colleagues, any additional questions? Otherwise, this is a note and file. We very much appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Very eye-opening for many people, ear-opening. Great. That brings us to item number 5, I believe. Chair Espinosa, would you read it into the record?
Item number 5 is a report from the Board of Harbor Commissioners relative to the permit with San Pedro Public Market, LLC, for the commercial redevelopment of the Ports of Call site.
And we only have one public comment card, and that has been satisfied. So, Mr. Liu, Mr. Galvin, whoever coming up.
Good afternoon. Mike Galvin, Director of Waterfront and Commercial Real Estate with the Port of Los Angeles. I'm going to go through a brief PowerPoint here just to go through the project that's in front of you. It's a 50-year ground lease for the San Pedro Public Market, which is a very instrumental part of our waterfront in the Port of Los Angeles, the LA waterfront. This will really tie our San Pedro side of the waterfront together from the bridge down to the breakwater and create a very large-scale public-private partnership on the waterfront to bring visitors regionally, statewide, and internationally back to a very prominent site along our waterfront. So the site, as I mentioned, is the Ports of Call redevelopment site, which is what we know it as today. In the future, it's going to be the San Pedro Public Market. It is a 30-acre site along the main channel of the Port of Los Angeles, which is a very unique situation for a waterfront development site, the most unique situation here in regards to being on a main shipping channel along the largest port in the country. So you therefore have the theater behind you of the ships transgressing back and forth up and down the main channel, which you cannot find at any other waterfront location, to actually see a working port ongoing as you come down to enjoy open spaces and dining and entertainment opportunities. As I mentioned, it's a historically prominent site, and it will be the first redevelopment of this historically prominent site. It was first developed in the 1960s by the Tallahassee Company, and they just exited recently, and now will be redeveloped for the first time in 50 years, which is a big deal. It's a generational development for the Port of Los Angeles and for the City of Los Angeles to once again reinvigorate the site to what it was in the past. San Pedro Public Market, LLC, is the developer here, which is a joint venture between the Rakovich Company and Jericho Development. Rakovich is a well-known regional developer. They're doing projects right now downtown at the Block, have done projects in the past at the Oviatt, the Wiltern, the Hercules campus in Playa del Rey. So a well-known, well-accredited regional developer that has been able to take a lot of problematic developments and turn them into really successful situations. Jericho Development is a local developer that has expertise within the San Pedro, Long Beach areas, and they have developments up and down 6th Street right now and future developments ongoing for the planning in San Pedro as well. The overall development scale is about 300,000 square feet. The first phase will be a little bit more than half of that, but the current environmental impact report allows for up to 300,000 square feet of retail, dining, and entertainment to be built on the 30-acre site. The development's first phase will be 168,000 square feet, more or less, and it will include restaurants, retail, dining locations over the water, entertainment, office uses, open spaces, and parking, all linked together by a public promenade that will be over half a mile long, which will stretch the length of this 30-acre site. It's a joint public-private partnership, $150 million between the developer and the Port of Los Angeles. About $85 to $100 million is estimated currently right now for the developer's first phase of that. The Port of Los Angeles has committed $52 million for 4 major public access investment projects that include the Waterfront Promenade, the Town Square, Sampson Way at 7th Street, and the public landing for recreational boaters to come in. It is very much a partnership between the Port of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and the developer here to create an integrated site revitalization. The site right now, as it exists, currently houses about 120,000 square feet of uses that are operational at this point, and we will phase that over the course of the next 5 years to bring in a complete new development. But we will not shut down at any point, and so it is a dance that we will do with the developer to make sure that we keep things moving, at the same time keep operating businesses that are successful in operation, but while bringing forward a new development. These are some depictions of the major public access investments that the Port is making. The Sampson Way at 7th Street intersection will tie down the main street that will come into the Port of Los Angeles on the San Pedro site down into the ports of call, as opposed to going through to Harbor Boulevard. So the main strip of right-of-way will now come directly through this development, and you'll be able to then make a right onto Harbor Boulevard. So that'll be a major intersection improvement to create traffic issues that we have today, as the existing ports of call is brimming over with visitors on the weekends as it is. The Town Square at 6th Street is a really important project for the community and for the Ports of Call project and downtown. It really ties downtown San Pedro with the Ports of Call project, which has been a very important piece for the local community and for local businesses that are not within the San Pedro Public Market site. It's important to have these integrations between the city of San Pedro and the site to make sure that everybody wins in this new development. The promenade, as I mentioned, is a half-a-mile strip that will tie the development north to south, and will tie people down from the Town Square, which will bring people down from downtown and take them all the way down to the south end of the development. There's a graphical depiction of what the first phase site plan looks like. It's clustered in 3 areas, really, and I will go through each of those areas, but as you can see, it spans the entire 30 acres and spans that half a mile along the main channel. The city park is the northernmost section. In the city park, you have 3 unique locations for restaurant opportunities, likely a location on the northernmost part that will be open late hours and early in the morning to bring people to the site at all hours of the day and then on all days of the week, which is an important facet of the project, to bring people daily, not just on the weekends. So as you can see, those 3 sites there on the north side will be adjacent to the public landing for recreational boaters as well, which will bring people from the water side as well. It's important in this project to bring people from both sides, water and land. Long Beach and other waterfront developments benefit from the accessibility from the water side and bringing boaters into these waterfront developments. But to do that, you have to have slips that can be guaranteed to provide them a parking space. The marketplace in the center of the development is really the dense portion of the development. This is where you will see most of the dining, the retail, and the office spaces in a 2-story setup that really will emulate the Port of Los Angeles as an industrial location, but with this commercial aspect to it, and will really be demarked by some of the maritime themes, berth numbers to actually show where places are, and that will guide people around as ships are guided around the port. So it's important to carry that theme throughout this development. I think the developer has seen that as part of the ULI processes that have come before this development, and is carrying that through their development scheme as well. The southernmost end, Discovery Sea Park, is an important place to both provide flexibility for future development, to allow for that excess 130,000 square feet or so to be developed after the first piece is developed as the market demands, and also to create a place for people just to come down and spend the day and to relax and to watch the theater of the main channel and the ships going back and forth to the terminals, and to be able to bring their kids down and really spend a day just on the waterfront, whether or not they're actually going into the development itself, that they're spending the day there and participating in different entertainment elements that will be in this portion of the project. The development project schedule starts now, really. In 2016, in the fall, we will start on the Sampson Way project. That is, construction will start for that project, and then you will see design finishing up through 2016, 2017 on the Town Square and the Portugal Promenade. You will see a conjoined design process going on with the developers project as well. As I stated before, this is very much a partnership. Both the developers project and the Ports Promenade and Town Square project have to meet as if there is no difference between the two. And that is a tricky thing to do, but something we have been working on and the lease definitely provides for. And we will rely on the skills of a very talented developer to get us through that, as well as the skills of our own department to make sure that all works. Overall project looking for completion in the year 2020, but we'll have pieces opening up hopefully before that. Have some depictions of the project to look at the main entryway there at berth 79, 80, and 78, which will bring you down through the center of the project into an area that will transgress the whole half mile. We're looking at bringing back the red car to the project, which will be important to move people both from north and south. As I stated several times, it is a half mile. It will be important to get people from both sides. This also brings back an element of the waterfront that's been important over the years in the red car. It also brings an attraction to the site for people to come down and to ride the red car and then to enjoy the development at the same time. So there's several aspects that this brings to the development which makes it very important. The Grand Market interior, this is the central location of the development as you come in through those pier markers that I showed a few slides ago. This will be a place where you will see local food purveyors offering a wide variety of food choices and drink choices in a communal space that really brings together both sides of the development and brings a place to stop in as you transgress the half-mile promenade. This is the public market exterior, and you see you will have some maritime aspects and some waterfront access for larger commercial operations, tour boats, dining, the tall ships you see there, and you can see the Discovery Sea Park there on your left as well. So a very much changed site from what we have today, really pushing back and bringing people along the waterfront, where today, to a high degree, there's not a lot of flexibility in moving from side to side on the development. The general ground lease terms is 50-year ground lease. It includes an option and an operational period. The option period is 42 months. There's no possessory interest by the developer during that 42-month period unless it is triggered before that, and there's all the opportunity in the world on both sides to complete those conditions prior to 42 months. The Port of Los Angeles' tasks during the 42 months are to prepare the site for development, which includes developing the pieces of public access, creating an economically viable parcel for us to give to the developer for them to start developing their side of this project, complete our construction of Sampson Way, and to deliver other pieces of the important public access. The developer's tasks will be to continue to advance project design to meet up with our promenade design, at the same time to secure project financing, which will be heavily based on their solicitation of tenants and landing those tenants within the site, and to secure entitlements to build the site, such as building permits. The leasing policy and standard lease terms of the Port of Los Angeles create a general overview of how we do our business. It's very much focused on the industrial side of the business. We are moving into a new direction to develop policies and procedures around the commercial side of our business. Those leases look different than the industrial side of our business. They just are different. The ground lease nature of this development requires certain provisions to be revised and changed to make it financeable and to make it workable and predictable for the developer long term. So things such as compensation, the tariff, indemnity insurance, assignment, restoration, and sublease approval needed to be revised to make this a successful development. And generally, this was a necessary process for the port to go through to be able to bring more and more private developers to the waterfront in future opportunity sites that we do have today. On the compensation side, currently the port is in full operational control of the facility, and so right now we are not doing too well financially. We have about a 2% rate of return. It is getting more and more expensive to maintain the site because of the age, and so we will be putting ourselves into a much better financial situation with the developer and have really created a win-win for both sides that creates equity once the developer has made a hurdle rate of return. So we have a tiered compensation structure that provides support with 3% initially of the gross receipts that the developer receives and up to 33% once they have gotten over this hurdle of 12%. So overall, if we don't reach that hurdle, we're in a 5.8% rate of return situation, which is better than we're at today. And if we do achieve that hurdle, at a 13.8% rate of return. So overall, we have really developed this structure to make sure that both sides shares in what their equity is into the project, which is for the port about $50 million and for the developer about $100 million. That's the end of the presentation. I would like to take any questions if there are any.
Start with that last slide. Could you explain the 33% after the developer achieves a 12% annualized hurdle rate? So that has to come in first before the other rate is increased, is that right?
Yes, that's right. So there's a base rate of 3%, and then on an annual basis, if they achieve over a 12% rate of return on costs that we have described in the lease itself, then the 33% would kick in at that point.
Why did you choose to, why was it done that way as opposed to sort of both growing at the same time? Both rates of returns kind of scaling at the same time?
You mean both the developer and the port's rate of return? Right. Their investment is higher than ours, and we needed to structure it that way to make sure that they could be competitive in finding both equity financing and institutional financing so that they could have some predictability in where they needed to be before they started making a major percentage share with the port.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, in most of these big projects, I think they usually bake in about a 10 to 12% return. So I guess that's about right.
Right, yes.
Tell me about the performance metrics that are in here. Are there specific ones that are included as part of the lease agreement?
Performance metrics as far as operational?
Yeah.
It's fairly well based on normal commercial standards. So we didn't want to overly burden the developer with a variety of metrics that could change over time. So it's very much based on, it's to some degree generic. One of the main things is subleases. We didn't want to be overly involved in the sublease process because that's why we chose a private developer to get them into the role that we're currently in. We're not, as a port, an expert in this type of commercial development, and so we're very much ceding that to the developer to make that work for us. So we trust in the partnership that they will make that happen because their development investment is much more than ours, and so to a high degree we have trusted that in them. But there are operational controls around how the site is maintained, and a great majority of the site and areas around the site will be going over to them to create homogeneous maintenance responsibility along this whole portion of the waterfront.
Well, it's a really exciting project, and I guess it's all, in some ways, this 50-year ground lease is one of the main enabling features, right? We were stuck before we were able to get to that 50-year lease. Is that right? And maybe explain how this is unique and how this does help make the project work.
The 50-year lease in itself is it's actually a potential burden on the project. It's hard to get long-term financing on ground leases. Once you get under 40 years, it's really hard to get anything past 5-year financing. And so that's a difficulty with the 50-year lease generally, is that These developments often change hands over a cycle, and a cycle is going to happen in 8 to 12 years, and so it doesn't provide a lot of flexibility to move to the next stage. And there is some effort to move from a 50 to a 66-year lease. On the state level, that has changed. The Port of Los Angeles is governed both by California state lands law as well as the city charter. The city charter is still 50 years, but California state lands has changed to 66 years. That would be helpful, but still, you could go 25 years down and you're still in the same situation of having that issue with having to find refinancing and don't really have a market that provides it. And so the Port is working on a leasing policy to address that issue, which will allow over time the Port to work as partners with their developers to find solutions to that issue. And the solution really is, as a new development proposal comes forward and it hits certain metrics, the Port should be willing to enter into a new lease and get past that issue. There'll have to be many factors looked at that time, and the Port is looking into putting those type of factors into a policy to create a very objective foundation for us to build this side of our business on. That is the most important thing. Moving it to 66 years helps. 50 years in itself helps. But you really need to get beyond that and get to a situation where the developers can rely that the Port is going to predictably act in the same way and provide for a situation where if they're providing something in an investment that is worthwhile to the Port to revitalize the site, that it makes sense for both sides to move into a new lease that will provide for financing that will allow that project to move forward.
Makes sense. Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, you know, when we get into office, we set a number of priorities and what we want to get accomplished in our respective districts. This project before us today was one of my top priorities, to work closely with the Port to transform Ports of Call into a development that's going to attract and diversify the businesses and bring tourism dollars into our area. Now, it's taken 4 years, but we're here today. We've been through 3 general managers at the Port. You have heard me on the council floor, oftentimes talking about redevelopment of our waterfront. We're here today on a decision that's going to create, I feel, a perfect marriage between the city, the Port, the Rakovich and Jericho companies. And I want to thank Mike and the developers who have been very patient with the process. We have moved forward within the last 18 months since Don Liu, the Chief of Staff, has come in and worked collectively with Gene Soroka, our General Manager, collectively with the Mayor's Office and the Commissioners. We wanted to make sure that we have a project in place. And yes, there have been some challenges, to Mr. Blumenfield's point. And one of those challenges has been the lease, the 50-year max requirement. Thankfully, with the new state law, a bill that was carried by State Senator Isidore Hall that has now worked with State Tidelands to now allow a 66-year lease for future development. But I do know that we still have to do our part on the city level to amend the city charter. Aside from amending the city charter, how would the 66-year state charter, and even more so if we go and when we go to the voters, because we plan on doing that, how would that 66-year lease, if approved by the voters, help with this current or this lease agreement that's before us today?
If it was 66 years and there wasn't that restriction, it would help by giving you multiple development cycles that you could get through and give more predictability to the developer to know that they could spend more money because they would be able to refinance out in 10 or 12 years and then maybe refinance out again or sell the project. So it would allow the developer to take more risk because they would have knowledge that there was an institutional lending instrument that they could go after later on, or a potential buyer that they could go after later on, where in this current situation with 50 years, that's limited after you get down past.
So the state law has been signed by the governor. If we go to the voters here in the city of Los Angeles and approve this to match the state law to 66 years, how would that impact this agreement that we may approve here today?
Well, this will still be a 50-year lease.
Okay.
Until it's changed. And
Yep.
so until those things change, well, once the state law and the city charter match up and they're both 66 years, the port could go back and have a negotiation with the developer to allow for an amendment to the lease once that is allowable by the law.
So we're all anxious to get shovels in the ground. We do know that there's already been interest in bringing investment into the San Pedro, downtown San Pedro area with retail, dining opportunities, housing opportunities. This is huge for us, colleagues. Amazing. And I know it's very important to the district that I serve, specifically San Pedro, the point where we're streaming this live on Facebook. A lot of folks are following this, following the progress of this when it started way back in 2009 when the EIR was approved. So encourage the support. I do, if I can, like to bring up Mr. Rakovich and Eric Johnson to the table. If I can, just have them come forward. Want to recognize you and thank you for, please, if I can, Mr. Chair. You both, you and your team, and I see Claire and Brian here, you could have easily walked away from this. You stuck to the process. There's a lot of frustrations, a number of calls, a number of, and a lot of dollars spent on your part. I want to give you an opportunity to say a few words. You've also been responsive to the community. When we found out that the red car was taken away because it wasn't really economically feasible for the Port of Los Angeles, you heard loud and clear, and you're bringing back a street car in the middle of the development, and it'll be a replica of our red car. This is huge for us. Tuane, you're a rock star developer. You have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into this city, as Mike alluded to, from Playa Vista, downtown Los Angeles, the Wiltern Theater. We are so blessed and honored to have your presence in the San Pedro area. Eric, you and your family have invested too in our downtown San Pedro, Wilmington areas. Thank you both for agreeing to these terms and moving forward and do everything we can to revitalize the area and build out a development that's equitable, if not better, than the waterfronts that we've visited around the country, from Seattle to Baltimore, to San Francisco, and San Diego. Wayne, I'll start with you. Just give us your take, and I want to give you an opportunity to say a few words since you are bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars in investment into our hometown.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your kind words. You're right, we could have walked away and we chose not to, and you're one of the main reasons we chose not to, because we know how important this project was to you and how important it was to the entire San Pedro community. This project needs to be successful so that it can bring new life into the San Pedro and Wilmington, the waterfront community. And that's why we exist. That's our business. That's what we do. One comment about the 50-year term. I mean, the biggest argument against the 50-year term is to look at ports of call today. Not in good shape. And what happens after 20, 25, 26 years, no one will put any money into the property and it deteriorates straight downhill. So we can get going on this, but we also will need all the help we can get to get that lease term extended. I think what we're doing is the right thing. It's to bring a form of development to the waterfront that will be very successful. You know, in spite of the condition of the ports of calls today, the sales are remarkable. It's almost $25 million a year of sales along that waterfront. So there's an opportunity to do something even better.
Right.
And I think that's where we're headed with this. And this will serve not only the San Pedro community and the Wilmington and San Pedro waterfront community, but it will serve to tie all of the waterfront attractions and activities together. And it should be a place for the people of Los Angeles to come to touch the water, see the water, and celebrate life in the city.
Thank you. And Eric?
Thank you, Joe. I do want to start by really thanking the entire city family. In this instance, it really took not a village, but a city to come together with a private development entity and problem solve. You know, one of the reasons we've been at it for 3 years plus, almost 4, is that the problems were significant. The opportunity, however, is more significant.
Yep.
As members of the local community, we know, and investors in San Pedro and the harbor area for a generation, that this is the type of catalytic event which can really spring us to our full post-industrial potential in this true South LA, as I like to call it, San Pedro. And again, kudos to the Harbor Department staff, to the harbor commissioners, to the executive director, to the mayor and the council, because really all were involved at various stages in making this possible. To echo Wayne's sentiment, we have launched this at a scale which will need some additional work to do the second phase to become that long-term community asset that the private sector can reinvest in every 10 to 20 years. You look at malls and other retail, that's how it needs to be managed in order to be relevant and fresh and not become what it has become. I think we've learned from that experience, and we're pledging to make this someplace truly, truly special.
Thank you both. And while I have you at the table, I know, going back to Mike's report, some of the tasks that the developers asked to prepare, obviously the advanced project design, secure project financing, and solicit tenants. That's something that we're all asking around town now. What's going to go down there? What's going to be down there? Is it going to be a mix tenant of both restaurants and retail, and secure entitlements to develop the site? Can you touch on a few of those issues and what can we expect from the development team moving forward?
In terms of the type of tenants that we will have and the type of activities that we see there, we're going to start with the San Pedro Fish Market, which is an existing tenant that does a great deal of business. And we will, I think, look at the existing tenants now on the so-called Ports of Call site. And see if there is a matchup among those tenants so that they can continue. What we're looking for here is businesses and tenants that are unique. This is not a place, the San Pedro waterfront is not a place to go down and see the same kind of department stores you can find in any shopping center USA. We hope to have very unique offerings, things that will, merchants and makers of goods that will provide a unique experience that you can only find in one place, and that will be at the San Pedro Public Market. And by the way, we gave it that name for 2 reasons. This is a public property. We don't own it, we're leasing it. So it's a very public property, and we are of the opinion that it is time to be very proud of the name San Pedro and give people a reason to know why the signs all over downtown say San Pedro, San Pedro, San Pedro. That's going to be what we expect to do.
An amazing design as well. That I know study after study shows that the development should fit the character of the community and the port, and want to compliment your design team as well. So, really appreciate that. Eric, you good?
Just to the entitlements, we're very fortunate to have had a good start with the existing EIR. It's gotten us to this stage. There's a lot of work to do with the rest of the city agencies, building permits, DWP, and everything else. So we'll want to have the continued cooperation to allow us to, stay on track in this ballet, really, as we coordinate our work seamlessly with this primary city agency and the port, but all the other players to bring this in on time, on budget, and on schedule and get it open.
And I want to talk about that on time, on budget, on schedule, because even today, colleagues in San Pedro, there's still skepticism about this development because we've been talking about it for 30 plus years. So I want to, hold our private partners, the port, accountable for those strict timelines to ensure that we move forward and we see shovels in the ground and we celebrate all these marks moving forward, all these milestones. So this is really appreciate everyone involved here in a long-awaited committee day that I've been looking forward to almost a lifetime. I'm looking forward to actually sharing this with the entire council and getting this over to the mayor to sign this lease agreement. Thank you.
And indeed, assuming that we move it forward, you'll have that opportunity this week?
Yes.
So that's the goal. So
Thank you.
thank you all very much. As we've talked about, this is a very exciting prospect. This is one step, one milestone in this great vision that you have shared with us that we are all excited about. So I say let's move forward with this vision, and seeing no objection, we are going to approve the port and CAO recommendations on this lease.
So moved.
So it is moved, and that is the order. Thank you. I believe that takes us to the end of our calendar. There's nothing else on the agenda, correct?
Well, we do have some public comment cards.
I have one public comment card.
Oh, general public comment.
On this item, you think?
No, just general public comment.
Yeah, there's no other public comments on this. We have one public comment from Mr. Herman. Mr. Herman, are you here? Seeing or hearing no Mr. Herman, public comment is closed, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.